Hi, here we are again, Ed August's books, and we're looking at the contents of box 83. So I have about 200 boxes. We're not going to go through all the boxes on this series, that we're doing, but just enough to show you, to whet your appetite, perhaps, to show you what kind of things, what kind of variety of things that I have. Here is the first one: is the price guide to Goss China. That's Goss China. Now, I would not have known that there is such a thing as Goss China. There's lists of it here, there's descriptions, and there's some photographs also. But it's a type of china that people collect. But I didn't know there was an entire book devoted to Goss China. Here is something called On the Loose. On the Loose was done by the Sierra Club back in the 1970s, early 1970s, in fact. Here's one of their guys with a guitar standing in the tide pools overlooking a site in central California. So this is a beautiful book that goes into um, the romance and adventure of the great outdoors that the Sierra Club loves so much. They're quite controversial now. I think these Sierra Club books are being bought now just because of how controversial they have become. Here's a cute book called Hummingbirds Nest, and this has to do with a woman and her kids, and they find a hummingbird has moved in to their patio or their front porch or something, and the whole rest of the book is a compendium of drawings, of color drawings of their life with this hummingbird and its children and everything. It's a sweet book. I got to tell you in advance, it's not one of these where there's some tragedy, and like a dog or a wolf or something comes and snatches one of the. No, it's just a very sweet story from start to end. Let's go into some history here. The Vikings in Britain, and now they were a tough crowd, and this has maps and features and stories and articles, all having to do with the adventures of the Vikings as they settled all along the coast of Scotland and England, and some of the stuff that turned up, that turned up in mounds and burial spots and stuff like that. So I have a lot of history. I just love history in general, so I have a lot of books about it. Revolution Now. This book is very odd. It was written by a evangelical, type who had I think like a little TV program every Sunday and whatever. And what the whole book about is about revolution, because he sees that the young people in the 1970s were all getting into revolt and stuff. I think it's focused in California, but I'm not entirely sure. But it's got some historical value. Here is David Reisman's Individualism Considered. So he wrote this in about 1950, I believe. And let's see what he had in here. Well, lots of things having to do with individualism as a kind of like a lifestyle, as a philosophy of life, as a philosophy that stands up against other philosophies of the time. The medieval mystics of England. Oh, so at the same time that England was getting was being landed by these Scandinavians and stuff like that, it was developing a real mystical Christianity, and so this book goes into that. Saint Alred, Saint Edmund Rich, Richard Rolle, Walter Hilton, Julian of Norwich, excerpts from the Book of Marjorie Kemp. In other words, excerpts from books about medieval Christianity we've never heard of before. Here's a kind of like a sweet book, really. Miracle in Mexico. You know what this is about? This is about the guy who found the trace of Mary Magdalene, or Mary, Mother of God, in a blanket or a sheet or something like that, and he presented it, to the priests in Mexico City, and it was taken as a miracle, and that became a symbol Mexican Christianity for the next 300 years. So this book goes into all that. This book came out. Did it come out in the 50s or the 60s? Hawthorne Books, publishers, New York. First printing 1965. So it is a first print. I do take note of first printings, first editions, in my notes, so that you know that if you're getting a valuable first edition. Little Lives. Okay, so what is this one about? The Astonishing Discovery. Okay, this book purports to have hundreds of little chapterlets, like some are just a few pages long, and they're sort of like from the gravestones. It starts with like from the gravestones of people who live in these small towns in, I think it was either Ohio or Illinois. It takes after Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology, which which was tossed at me when I was in high school. So this is sort of like a takeoff on that. Also from about the 1950s or 1960s. The only thing is, it's fake. These are not real elegies. They're not real things that have been put on stone. That have been there for 200 years or something. The guy made it up, but that doesn't mean that it's not a very sweet, kind of book. If you like that kind of thing, you have to like that kind of thing. How about this one? Colored Glassware of the Depression Era. So this book has been around. That the dust jacket on it is pretty shot, but you can see that the cover, the actual cover of the book, is very good. And what this book has is pictures. I don't know if I can hold it right way up, of the glassware, of all kinds of glassware, that mostly 19th century glassware, and therefore its value and stuff. Now from glassware, we go to war and things like that. Here's the Secret Army, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army of 1916 to 1970. So this is a very historical piece, and it's a massive book. It's 400 pages, and it goes into their campaigns and the various things that they did in the fighting against the Great Britain. Almost in keeping with this book is this one. It parallels. It's called The Red Orchestra. It's an incredible stranger-than-fiction account of the activities of the Soviet spy system in Europe during World War II. So this book would all be about Soviet spies in England and Germany and Ireland and France and places like that, and the problems that they ran into and what kinds of things they did in their spying. Wasn't all pretty. And we're getting down to the end here. Laws, Courts, and Lawyers Through the Years in Arizona. Laws, Courts, and Lawyers. So here I am in the Tucson, Arizona area. So I come across these kind of books every so often. And this has much to do about the actual court system, how they were set up, who was in them. It just goes all into the lawyers and the laws and the judges probably more than anything. Finally, Twice Born Ministers. Now this is a book from the 1920s, and it's a work of fiction. It has to do with a couple of guys that were ministers and their friendship and kinds of things. It's not for everybody. I think a lot of people would find it kind of dull. But anyway, that's that. And there's still a couple here. The German Question, a documentary. So this came out after World War II, and it has to do with Germany in the world as like a member of the United Nations practically. Not that it was for many years, but it's a documentary, and it's quite a documentary. It's like 500 pages. So there's that. We're getting near the end. Modern tribal tattoo designs. Can you imagine that? This may not look like my kind of book, but but it's art for people of the contemporary age. And so here we have really interesting and unusual patterns and symbols. And hey, if you buy this book, they're all yours. So I don't know much about this kind of stuff, but there are hundreds of designs. of tattoos in this book. Finally, look away if you don't like, creepy animals and stuff. It's called The Snake, the Spider. No punctuation in it, just a snake and the spider. And it has to do with these creatures here of the Southwest. I'm not actually sure how large of a uh, area this book, takes in. Maybe it says on the back here, welcome to a world of wit and rare esteem for the Earth's creatures. Travel through the complex and engrossing world of spiders and snakes. It doesn't say what part of the world he's active in, so I can't say. Maybe I should have looked that up first. But if you like critters, there's not actually that many pictures of them. So if a few pictures on the front, a few pictures on the back. So, and to those of you who are very sensitive disposition, I apologize for this book. Next time I'll have something that is not so creepy. So these are the contents of this one particular box that I have. If you go to my website and look around, you'll see that I have boxes into the 80s and 90s and soon probably into the hundreds. So you can look for it as box, was it 87 or 78? I can't see it from here.
83.
87?
83.
83. Thank you very much. Our camera person over there. Box 83. That means that I have 80 times this many books elsewhere on my site. Just look for it, and thank you very much for looking in today.